Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Thursday, July 17th, 2025. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the differentiation between different configurations of therapy, individual therapy, going to therapy as a couple, going to therapy as a family or a subset of a family. And I want to talk about those both in the context of how they compare and contrast with each other, how each of them serve different aspects of our psyche, of our personality, of our healing, of our relationships, and also the fundamental aspects of therapy as I see them. This kind of psycholytically informed or attachment informed therapy, sometimes referred to parts of it as depth therapy, a Jungian therapy. Before I get into that, let me go with the housekeeping items. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. We have a new opening for our next week, our intensive next week. It's been full. I've been announcing it for a couple of months, but somebody had to drop out for personal reasons. So there's a spot open for the July 23rd through 27th intensive. This is the kind of work for me that is the perfect springboard. It is a product, of course, that I sell, but I believe in this with all of my heart. I think it's the most powerful, dynamic, therapeutic product I've ever been associated with. For those of you that are waiting, that are looking for this, I will be running the Finding You Intensive in August 13th through 17th. That is the last intensive of 2025, the last Finding You Intensive that I'll be running. So I'll be running that one. Of course, September 3rd, October 1st, November 5th, and December 3rd are the subsequent offerings of our intensive. You can go to our website or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. If you're looking for a therapist or a coach who can work with you in this model, in this attachment-based model, go to our website or email us at that email. Private inquiries, suggestions, intensives for couples or families, info@findingyouprograms.com is the email. I'm going to be hosting October 12th through 17th, a 5-day workshop at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. So if you want to attend a workshop that's experiential, that's spiritual, the Audacity to Be You is the name of it. Go to the E-Omega website, that's eomega.org, and click on the workshops and then look under the Audacity to Be You offering. It's around $500 for a 5-day workshop. So it's a wonderful, wonderful value. And I look forward to that. I'm going to be running that with my daughter, Emma. The Finding You Inner Circle is ready to launch. So this is a subscription and support of the Finding You podcast. This gives you access to all of these live episodes. Also, there'll be 2 episodes approximately per month that I'll be releasing that will not be a part of the public offering. So if you're interested in that, check that out on our website or the email that I mentioned. If you are a Finding You alumni, you'll be automatically enrolled in this. So with that, let me get into tonight's topic. Carl Jung has a very well-known saying that says, speaking to therapists, know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, just be another human soul. One of my core values is that I don't subscribe to any one model, any theory, any set of techniques. It's really about the human experience. It transcends theory. The difficulty, and I get asked this a lot about certain approaches and theories, anything from EMDR to brain spotting, to cognitive behavioral therapy, to dialectical behavioral therapy, to internal family systems. I think all of those offer perspectives, a story, a framework, if you will, that can give the client and the therapist some meaning to tap into, some way of seeing themselves with some greater clarity or some new perspective. But the problem with all of those theories is if you are that first, then the theory can easily eclipse the client. So when somebody asks me, does this theory work? Do you use this theory? My answer is, when it fits for the conversation, I can bring that stuff in. If I have that knowledge in my back pocket, I can bring it in. But I'm not thinking about you simply through this context. I'm thinking about you as a human soul, as a person, not a pathology, not a diagnosis, not a mix of internal family system structures, but as a person. And if those theories lend themselves to it, it can be fantastic. I want to just say that any theory that promises that it is the answer or that it is the cure, I would be very skeptical of. When I sell my therapy, what I say is it takes a long time. It's really, really hard work. It's arduous. And sometimes the sessions don't really hit the center. Sometimes, for one reason or another, the sessions that we have, the conversations we have, might fall flat. But over time, it's like an exercise routine. Over time, you build up a base. And over time, when you show up on weeks that you need it, on weeks when you're in crisis, or on weeks when you don't feel like you need it, that all comes together to create this experience that is transformative over time. Just like these podcasts, it is exposure to a sensibility, exposure to a way of thinking, to a mentality. Part of the reason that I think so many people share with me that they listen to these over and over again, even though they all accurately point out that I say and talk about the same things over and over again, no matter what the title is or what the perspective is, they're trying to re-engage into a certain level of consciousness. I read a meme just the other day on social media. It showed a picture of an art drawing of Jesus Christ, and he was talking about the quote, "In my Father's house there are many mansions," and the quote was, even the greatest teachers in the world use metaphor, allegories to describe various levels of consciousness, becoming more aware, becoming more present, being able to see and hear things that we weren't able to see. I borrowed this quote from Rick Rubin and his book, The Creative Act. I love borrowing thoughts, ideas from scientists, artists, from all different perspectives, because this kind of thinking, the kind of stuff that I talk about, again, because we're talking about something so fundamental, it's nice to hear it through different language, through different perspectives. So Rick Rubin says this, speaking about art and the creation of art. He says, in service of this robust instinct, consider submerging yourself in the canon of great works. Read the finest literature. Watch the masterpieces of cinema. Get up close to the most influential paintings. Visit architectural landmarks. There's no standard list. No one has the same measures of greatness. The canon is continually changing across time and space. Nonetheless, exposure to great art provides an invitation. It draws us forward and opens doors of possibility. If you make the choice of reading classic literature every day for a year rather than reading the news, by the end of that time period, you'll have a more honed sensitivity for recognizing greatness from the books than from the media. I love that idea. I remember early on in my therapy, before I had a grasp of what was happening in psychotherapy, I remember telling my therapist, I just have different thoughts after talking to you. I come away with new thoughts I hadn't thought before. And I was going to say this later on, I'll say it now. Part of what I hear when people quote me or say, Brad would tell you this, I should say very often, it's not necessarily the thing that I would say. Because what I would say is ask questions, is listen, and try to reflect back the core of what is being presented to me. And sometimes when I share my opinion or perspective, when I say something like, well, I might do it this way, or this is how I look at it, I'm not suggesting, I say this emphatically, I'm not suggesting that that's the right way to think about it or approach it. I'm just trying to point out an option, opening people up to the limited perspective that they have. It's no different than visiting another culture, right? Therapy is visiting another culture. It's exposing ourselves to something other than our own background. And by that exposure, we realize that our own background is contrived, that the constructs, the ideas, the models, the way of seeing, the values weren't the right ones. They were just the values, the constructs of our family, of our background. And this exposure and the non-judgment that comes with that exposure opens the person up to all the possibilities, or to more possibilities. Jamie Gill, my therapist, great author, she wrote, the experience of seeing one's base from a different perspective can be profound. One way this happens is by allowing ourselves to be honest and open with somebody who does not react the way our parents did. And I love this next sentence. For example, what was very bad at home is now nothing. I'm going to read that again. What was very bad at home is now nothing. This difference in experience allows for the realization that things can be different. One's assigned position in one's past is not necessarily one's assigned position in the universe. I read this quote today from Sylvia Plath that actually reminds me of this idea. She said, "Your room is not your prison, you are." The dragon that stands guard at the door of the dungeon that we find ourselves in, psychologically speaking, is made up. At the end of the Matrix, toward the end of the Matrix, when he catches the bullets, when everything slows down and he catches the bullets, picks them out of the air and drops them on the ground, it's an illustration that the ideas, the shoulds, the shouldn'ts, the way that we were supposed to be, supposed to live, supposed to feel is a made up construct. And we don't have to accept it. So individual therapy for me is the base of all therapy. And I will tell you that this is important for me to share with you. This comes not from my education, because my education taught me exactly the opposite. My master's degree is in marriage and family therapy. My PhD is in marriage and family therapy. And both of those degrees taught me the religion of marriage and family therapy, which said that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, that treating people individually in this kind of reductionistic way doesn't really address the problem. We need to treat families together. We need to treat couples together to understand what's going on. My experience has shown me just the opposite. That by reducing things down to the individual, we see the context of the relationship, the context of the argument, of the fight, of the marital discord, of the struggling child. We see when we look closely, right, under the microscope of individual therapy, if you will, we see what is being brought to bear on the family or on the couple or on the child. The kind of therapy that I'm talking about, this method that is not a method, is long-term. Like I warned earlier, be wary of therapy or therapists and their techniques who offer or cure or suggest this one-size-fits-all. I remember sitting in a class with my therapist many years ago. She taught at the University of Utah for many, many years. And over the course of our therapy, I asked if I could come in and sit on one of her doctoral classes. And she said that I could. It was a small class, 6 or 7 students. And she was teaching something about psychology. And one of the students said, "Well, what if I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist?" And I remember the look on her face. We talked about it later the next week in session. This idea that I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, or I'm an IFS therapist, or I'm an action commitment therapy therapist. This idea to me is so limiting. The idea, as I understand in psychology, is to understand all of it and how all of it fits. The old Zen idea that the way we do one thing is the way we do everything is involved in this kind of thinking. It doesn't matter what we talk about. We can talk about your career. We could talk about your child. We could talk about your marriage. We could talk about your friendships, your work relationships, your family of origin. We can go right to the source. But we are essentially talking about the same thing. Sometimes short-term therapy can be very good at symptom reduction. In a way, this analytically informed, attachment informed, depth psychology kind of therapy doesn't really work at reducing symptoms. In fact, it sees the symptom as a gift, as something not to get rid of or to resolve, but something to listen to. It is a messenger, an angel, if you will, from the unconscious. It is asking something of us, and can we learn to listen to that? And over time, can we respond to that call, that urge, that need, without developing the symptomology to express it? So this kind of work that I'm teaching, that I talk about, is not symptom reduction, but rather a shift to a different level of consciousness, That quote from Einstein, you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it, is the model. And often, I don't know how therapy is going to go. Somebody asked me one time when meeting with a client they had referred to me, what are you going to say to them after giving me the background? And I said, I think I'm going to start off with, how are you doing? How can I be helpful? What's up? What would you like to talk? That's the starting point. Tell me, let's start doing this together. It's not something that I do with you. Yes, there's teaching. Yes, there are skills. And yes, there are ideas that help alleviate painful and difficult symptoms that are unbearable. But for me, it's so much more important fundamentally to address the spiritual nature of this work, the transcendent nature, I use the word fundamental a lot, the fundamental issues that are presenting themselves. So in therapy, this is developing a base. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow to you. I don't know what's going to happen in your marriage. I don't know what's going to happen with your child. But the base is like developing your base muscles, right? It's doing functional fitness. It's helping you understand the scales in music theory maybe. We'll practice a song or two, but we're going to teach you what the notes mean in relationship to each other. And then over time, you can create your own art, which is your life. So it's building a sense of self. Who are you? In a lot of ways, I think individual therapy that we do is about helping you become who you truly are. Now, what that means is that you're no longer in need, in so much as you become yourself. You're no longer in need of the defense, because the defense is a protective barrier we put up against threats. And once we accept who we are, there's no threat. And of course, that's a big thing to say. Not very many people arrive at the conclusion, right? At the destination. It is a constant journey. Just in the same way that nobody arrives in a physical fitness program. You might get your goal weight, you might lift your goal, run the mile in the goal that you had set for yourself. But if that's the finish line and you stop there, you will absolutely, inevitably atrophy back to even worse than you started. So we're building the soil. I remember one time my therapist was saying, this was not the first time, nor the last, something very nice about me and my skill set and my who I am and what I'd accomplished. And I said, it just doesn't feel like it sinks in. It doesn't make a difference. What you're saying, I could probably even agree with you intellectually, but I don't feel it reaching me. And she said, that makes sense. There's no soil for it to take root in. But eventually the soil that we're preparing will be able to provide sustenance for the roots. And then you will grow whatever it is that is your gift to give to the world. Sometimes people find therapists or even friends, and this is more common, who say things like, I don't like to look backwards. I don't like to look into the past. I just want to go forward. That sounds pleasant, but it doesn't make any sense about what we know about psychology. And luckily today, even compared to when I started this podcast, even 10 years ago, that's more widely understood and known. There are genetics, there's epigenetics, there's environment, there's the zeitgeist, there's cultural messages, there's reinforcement patterns. There's so much to take into consideration. But perhaps none is more vital to understanding the psychology of your relationships than your emotional history as a child growing up, what you learned. The science is clear. Human infants are helpless animals. And their brain doesn't get fully developed for around 25 years, which is a good thing, because that means that what we are capable of at 25 is phenomenally more advanced than what we are at birth, because we can't be born with the brain development that we have at 25. It would be too much. No woman would be able to give birth to a child because the brain would be too big, too heavy, too complex. So the fact of the matter is our brains are shaped, they are pruned, they are designed, they are hardwired over time through patterns, most of which are implicit, nonverbal, not conscious. So that's what we're looking back on, and it's invisible. Our childhood, the dynamics in our childhood are largely invisible to most of us. Even somebody like you or me who's involved in this work, who's interested in this work. I've been in therapy for most of my life. And yet I'm still becoming aware of things that were taught to me that I wasn't aware that were taught to me, that were modeled for me, that were reinforced or discouraged. I'm still finding those nuggets. I shared in the last broadcast that I met a friend recently, and he commented in a playful way about how strange it is that in our dreams, we can be walking down a street and something can jump out and scare us in our dreams. And he laughed and remarked on the fact that we're the ones that created the scare, the person that, the character that jumps out in the dream. How can we be scared and surprised by it if we are the author of that act? And the answer, of course, it is our psyche playing a little trick, doing a magic trick for us and showing us that it can hide things from us, that there are things that we are not conscious of that will and do impact us in our lives. In fact, the more unconscious you are, Jung says this, the more that you experience what happens to you as fate, as something that's happening outside of you. That Sylvia Plath quote that I gave you at the beginning, that it's not our room that is our prison, it's our own mind, it's ourselves. That's what she's saying. So people that don't know that their history is determining their future are at the mercy of their circumstances. They walk around in the world not knowing why things are happening, assigning it to something we call fate. Therapy can get worse before it gets better. That makes sense. If the psyche feels the need to create defenses against threats, and those defenses start to be let down, right? We take those defenses down, it's going to be more painful. We are going to grieve. We are going to hurt. We are going to experience feelings and thoughts and even memories at times. And that's another thing about therapy. I don't sit there and say, tell me about your childhood. I do that sometimes, but I could talk about what happened to you today. And that's how we find your childhood, right? It's not that I remember certain things about childhood through therapy that I didn't remember. It's that as I become more aware of what impacted my conversation, my argument with my wife yesterday, for example, or maybe a conflict I had with a friend or one of my children. And when I see that over and over again, I begin to see my childhood more clearly. I look back on it with new eyes. I listen to it with new ears. So it's not so much a remembering of something new. It's becoming more conscious today so that when I look back on the exact same experiences that I might have even remembered to some extent with a greater clarity, with a new context. I dropped out of high school when I was in 10th grade before going back later. And the story of why I dropped out has changed over the course of the last 30 or 40 years. I assign different meaning to what happened and why. Each version building on the last. One of the questions I always ask is your therapy in therapy or getting supervision? There's this, when you're in graduate school and they prepare you as a new therapist for clients potentially asking you about your own work and your own therapy, they give you tools to avoid answering the question. That's what they do. It's a very compassionate, offering by our professors, because we were all scared to death, of course, and not knowing how scared we were. But the fact of the matter, I think it's a fair question. Not to get into the specifics, but to say, what's your experience with therapy? Do you seek supervision, and how? And the fact of the matter, it's not what the therapist says specifically always that I would pay attention to. Is how they respond. How do they seem to feel by the question? Do they even give you credit for the wisdom and the courage of asking the question? So regardless of what they say, how they respond tells me something about our relationship and how it's going to be, because therapy is a sacred relationship. The therapist relationship is sacred. They become somebody with which I see myself through. I experience myself in relationship to. So even the therapist relationship, that experience, right? We talk about experiential therapy, the experiential nature of therapy, of sitting in a room and telling somebody the truth about myself, is profoundly difficult and terrifying, because what do I expect? I expect you to respond like I've been responded to in the past. So ask the questions, say the things, and go past the point when you feel stuck. I often tell people the way that you know that you have a good therapist is by talking to them about the relationship and the feelings that you have toward them, toward last session, toward something that they said. And how they respond to you will tell you all about their emotional intelligence and evolution and maturity. And if they respond with respect and gratitude and appreciation for you taking the risk, you've got a good one. If they respond with defensiveness or coldness, or translating the question back to something being wrong with you, then you might have a therapist that hasn't done enough work to be able to help you. Aldous Huxley said, there's only one corner of the universe you can be certain of improving, and that is your own self. So you have to begin there, not outside, not on other people. That comes afterwards when you have worked on your own corner. As a general default, with exceptions, of course, I encourage people to go into their own work first. Now, truth be told, any gate, any door that gets people into a place where they can begin to explore themselves, I'm on board for. So if that's couples therapy or family therapy, that's wonderful. But if I'm being asked where to start with individual work. You want your spouse to go to therapy? Go to therapy. You want your child, or think your child needs to go to therapy? Go to therapy. And go to a therapist that doesn't just think that it's about symptom reduction, solving the problem that's in front of you, but addressing the consciousness that surrounds and is involved in that problem, that issue, that dilemma. This form of therapy is our life's work. Henry Miller once said, one's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing things. Perhaps the greatest barrier to therapy is the time that it takes. Most people give up too soon to experience the deep kind of change that I'm talking about. Sigmund Freud warned. He said, you will be making a bad mistake if, in an effort perhaps at shortening the analysis, you throw your interpretations at the patient's head as soon as you have found them. In that way, you will draw expressions of resistance, rejection, and indignation from him. But you will not enable his ego to master his repressed material. Your therapists are human people. They're human beings. And due to their insecurities, we are prone to throw interpretations at the head of the client. We want to be helpful. We want to earn our keep. And so we try to go too fast. And we bump up against the defense. And when we do that, it could be said that we've made the wrong interpretation, no matter what it is. As Jamie Gill says in one of her books, it's important to recognize the defense is doing important psychological work, or the energy required to maintain it would not make sense. Ripping away defenses does not improve the situation. Taking them away before the person is able to tolerate what the defense is masked leaves the person worse off than before. At least before, with the defense, he or she could function. Now he or she is incapable. And my favorite quote for all family members, all members of a marriage, of a couple. She concludes by saying this thought by saying, both cruel people and inadequate therapists are famous for a desire to destroy defenses without considering the consequences. And by destroying the defenses, it's just simply saying, that's your fear, that's your anxiety, that's your depression, that's your whatever. This is how it is in ACT. This is how it is in DBT, in CBT, in IFS. Go slowly. Accept scanty results. Because to be in a hurry with the client is most likely going to recreate the wounds of childhood, where the parent was anxious and worried, hoping to quickly improve the situation with their child. You see, as I wrote recently, on your journey inward, the prize isn't the treasure you find. It's not even the answer, the connection that you make. It's not the new interpretation or the connection you make as you become more conscious. The prize of therapy, the gift of therapy, is that you felt safe enough to go looking in the darkest corners of your own shadow. That's the treatment. Safety is the treatment, not the precursor, not setting the stage for therapy. Safety is the treatment. Repeated exposure to a safe other rewires the brain for safety, for attachment, so that the person can get rid of the defenses, not because they should or because defenses are bad, but because they don't need them anymore. Because now they trust their wings, not the branch that they're standing on, but their wings. They trust themselves. Speaking of the defense, a psychological defense, like I mentioned, is a protection against a threat. Confronting defenses can make things worse, make the individual feel more threatened. I used to justify this all the time as a young therapist. Confronting the defenses, pointing to the trauma, making the connection for the client. Really outing the client, not giving them autonomy and sovereignty over their own experience, their own coming out story. And one thing inherent in almost all trauma is the lack of control, the lack of choice. It happens to us against our own will. That's where it becomes therapeutic abuse. The most effective way to eradicate the defense is to create a safe place, approaching the other with love and non-judgment. You see, defensiveness doesn't feel like defensiveness from the inside to the one exhibiting it. It feels like they don't understand me. They don't see the whole picture. So the task is to find and understand the other. Rumi said, you can't force a rose to bloom. It will bloom when it's kissed by the sun. That's what he's talking about. The task is to not fix, but to find the other, finding you. And when you are found, you blossom. This compassion that I'm talking about, this compassion that at exploration is the precondition for transformation. It is the fuel, the potion for transformation. Gill said in the same passage, near the same passage of the one I read earlier about attacking the defense, she said, the therapist or guide we choose must not duplicate the wounds of the past. Thus, if the therapist or guide knows what is right for us, listen to that. If the therapist or guide knows what is right for us and manipulates us to achieve these treatment goals, it is abuse, plain and simple. And she follows it up with, it's hard to see how good abuse ever cures bad abuse. You see, the secret is right in front of us. It's so obvious that we don't see it. We are healed in the same manner, the same way, through the same process that we are wounded in relationship to others. In this specific format today, in relationship to the therapist. The therapist becomes the safe parent that we did not have. Therapy becomes the safe childhood 1 hour at a time that we did not have. A child learns about themselves as they look into the face of their parents and the other big people in their early context. How they think and feel about themselves. Excuse me. How the big people think and feel about the child becomes the child's inner voice. Notice, this is not just what we say to the child, but what we feel around the child. So perhaps the most insidious energy is the unowned anxiety of the parent. The parent harmfully and paradoxically calls this fear love. It's just my love. It's just that I love you. It's just that I want to protect you. But if it gets expressed, if it manifests itself in the body of the parent as fear, the child gets confused because it doesn't feel like love. Love is safe. Love is warm. Love is containing. It's fear. It's not bad. It's just fear. So when a person doesn't own their anxiety, I'm anxious, I'm insecure, I'm feeling inadequate, I'm feeling afraid. When a person doesn't do that, they are likely to take it out on other people. They assigned the feeling in their body to the other person, to their behavior, to the context, to the world. It's out there, not in here. The unconsciousness of the big people in our childhood spoke directly to the unconscious of the child. And the child develops an identity, a core identity based on that energy or that feedback. This is how skills fall short. Containing, holding, nurturing, being a safe person to offer co-regulation to the child is the foundation of the work in parenting and the work in therapy. Just as wounding is virtually invisible to most people, so is healing. So when does couples and family work? I think it's more advanced. Couples and family work is more advanced than individual therapy. Because at best, in a two-person system, a couple, for example, at best, 50% of the session is for you and 50% of it is for your spouse, your partner. So while the therapist is attending to your spouse's story, their version of things, listening deeply, trying to find them, you will maybe feel triggered. That's not how it was. That's not what happened. That's not the story. That's not the way it went. Let me tell my version of things. So the therapist turns to you to listen and explore deeply, to hear you. And then it's your partner's turn. That's not how it went. That's not the story. That's not what happened. You're exaggerating. You're leaving this part out. Therapy is a place, couples, family systems therapy is a place to go to stitch together, to bridge together the individual work. In my perspective, it works best in that way. It's a place to tell the truth and a place to be heard. But sometimes telling your truth is triggering for your spouse and vice versa. And everybody listening to me knows that. So in therapy, this is so powerfully true and so illuminating. In therapy, at times, you have to be okay with your needs not getting met. And doesn't that sound completely contrary to what therapy ought to be? That's why it's more advanced. Most people I have found come to therapy with the unconscious and implicit idea that if you could just fix my partner or my son, my daughter, my whatever, things will be much better for me. And wouldn't that be nice? I said that one time to a colleague who runs a program like ours, and he looked at me like I was from Mars, and I said, that is the unconscious act. Even as a therapist, knowing consciously that that's not the way that I would ideally approach therapy, I still think that. Fix my wife, fix my children. Things will go much better for us if you just fix all the people around me. So couples and family therapy means that you have enough wherewithal to temporarily set aside your needs, not permanently, but temporarily set them aside, to be there for the other. When I go to therapy, the rare times that I go to family therapy as a participant, as a client, or couples therapy, I listen to how the therapist talks to my family members to see what I might be missing in my interactions. I watch her hear them in ways that I don't so easily hear them because I get triggered. I listen to her reflecting back. And all she's showing me is this is their story. This is their perspective. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just their story. It's like listening to their dreams. It's the truth. It's just cloaked and disguised in the story. Sometimes we need help in couples therapy to state our truth. I know I do. I need a safe anchoring point to tell my truth. And it might not go well with the other family member. Sometimes I need support and coaching to listen. Like I said, I need a model. Often therapy will start with the person who instigated therapy. So if you're bringing your spouse to therapy, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to start with asking and exploring your background, your dilemma. If you're bringing a child in, I'm going to start with you because you're the one asking for the thing. I get asked the question all the time: same therapist or different therapist? Should I have an individual and a couples therapist? The book tells you the kind of standard operating procedure in therapy is that you have a couples therapist and an individual therapist, and they're not the same person, and that a therapist doesn't see two people in the family, two members of a family. I have been trained in a different way. I will see individuals, couples, family members, any configuration, with some exceptions. And that is, if people start to use me to punish each other, Brad said, this is what Brad said. If that happens, then I tell the couple, I can't do this. I can only meet with one of you. Because my experience, I was thinking about the movie The Matrix. One of them when Neo goes to see the Oracle. And the Oracle suggests that Neo is not the one, the savior in this story. And when Neo repeats that story, his teacher, his mentor, Morpheus says, she told you what you needed to hear. So when I'm doing therapy with a family member, I'm doing it for them. And it's for their ears only. When I'm talking to you, none of what I say to you is for your spouse. None of what I say to you is for your child. So often it's a mistake to leave a podcast of mine or a session of mine and go back to the child, to the spouse, and say, here's what I learned that applies to you. Other common errors that happen in couples and family systems therapy is that I can finally fix my partner. I finally have a leverage point, a lever to fix my partner. There's also a mistake that just sharing. Sometimes therapists said, have you told your mother? Have you told your father? Have you told your spouse this? That's a great question on its surface. But sometimes the implication or the suggestion is if you do it, it'll go well. Sometimes it goes horribly. Sometimes it leads to a fight. But that's good information too. It's just that the belief that sharing will solve it is not sophisticated enough, not nuanced enough, not complex enough for our purposes here today. Sometimes people think that relationship therapy will help me feel understood and seen by the other. Sometimes I just want to witness. Sometimes I just like the container. Sometimes my wife would say to me sometimes that she was surprised what I brought up. And sometimes I'm waiting for that safe place to do it. That support. Even if my wife is upset, I still have that one person in the room that can anchor it. Seeing relationship issues as separate from my own issues is a flaw. Strupp, a researcher, wrote, psychotherapy can be viewed as a new attachment relationship that restructures attachment. Related implicit memory. It's not what is said. It's not the information or skills. It's the way they see and feel and are around you. It's a different kind of a person. And most of us therapists, me included, started this off with just the skills, the tools, the techniques. No real connection to the work. We were too young, too inexperienced. I was. I found this quote this week from a woman named Amy Young. She said, "It's not your job to police anyone else's behavior or educate them on who you think they should be. Your only job is to filter for yourself who gets a ticket into your world and who needs to stay at the gate." When I do couples therapy, I don't have an agenda about the couple staying together or not. I have an agenda for each of the members of the relationship, of the couple, of the marriage, to figure out for themselves what is the best path forward for them. What's the most meaningful, richest way forward? What is the way that they want to go? And can I support that? James Hollis said, "The truth about our intimate relationships is that they can never be any better than the relationship we have with ourselves." And that includes those in the world who say, don't look at yourself. It makes it worse. You're talking too much. You're thinking too much. You're looking to the past too much. I get asked the question all the time, should I require my teen to be in therapy, my child to be in therapy? This is one of those examples that I mentioned earlier that I'm going to tell you what I think now, which isn't the right way, but it's just a way. So what I'm about to say is not the right way, nor is what I'm suggesting you should do or think or feel. And in fact, it's different than something I would have said years ago. My answer is, I don't think it's very effective to require teens to go to therapy. I'm speaking of outpatient therapy. I feel differently about in-person, residential treatments, places where people live or programs that people go to. That can be more powerful. But outpatient therapy is hard, and I'm talking about for the participant. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time for me to make fundamental shifts in my consciousness. So I don't necessarily require. I would encourage, this would be an example where I might encourage somebody to require family therapy first so that the parent can get grounded, or even better yet, encourage the parent to go to therapy first. If the result of your therapy or your self-help reading or your medicine journeys result in telling others that they should go to therapy or should read the latest book or should go on a medicine journey, you have more work to do. In other words, keep doing your work until you don't know what on somebody else's path should be. And maybe most importantly, this idea. As I see it, the work in individual therapy is not about becoming so good, improving yourself so that you're beyond reproach. I think a lot of people think that's what therapy is. I'm going to learn and I'm going to be better. I'm going to be gooder. I'm going to say and do the right, the healthy things. I don't think it's that. I think progress in therapy leads to self-compassion and acceptance of who we are. So that when we're criticized, it doesn't trigger us, doesn't bother us, because we've made peace with those parts of ourselves that we have been taught to reject and despise. As the great painter Georgia O'Keeffe says, "I've settled it for myself. Therefore, criticism and praise go down the same drain." It doesn't matter. Another way of thinking about it is, if the foundation of your own individual work is advanced enough, what other people think and feel about you becomes about them. You actually hear and see them better because you know yourself. To the extent that you don't know yourself, you don't know if what they're responding to is about you or not. Your self-awareness, your consciousness is only as complete as your self-compassion. Therapy is about developing a new relationship with yourself, a compassionate relationship with yourself. Because if you don't have self-compassion for your horrible, rotten self, as I like to call it, you won't be able to see it. It's too threatening. You'll make up a story where it's not your fault, it's not about you, it's somebody else's problem. You will not see it in yourself, you will project it out there. And that is inevitably the number one rule of the psyche. What does not get owned is projected onto others, most pointedly our children and our spouses. As James Hollis says, it's not a disease. Life is not a disease or a neuroses or a cancer to be excised. Because any seeming resolution today will have to be revised tomorrow, for the psychic is a flowing river, and yesterday's resolution is tomorrow's construction. It's a way of being, a way of thinking, a way of relating to the world. Jamie Gill, in referencing Heinz Kohut, a great psychoanalyst, wrote, Kohut thought that the goal of psychotherapy was to become an ordinary suffering human being. That is, to be real. So if you have codependency, you don't have the choice today to not be codependent. If you have a narcissistic wound, you don't have the choice to not have a narcissistic wound. If you're insecure about your intelligence, about your body, today you don't have the choice to not have those feelings and thoughts. The only thing you can do is accept them, keep them in front of you. For if you don't keep them in front of you, they will end up showing up in the face of everybody around you. And you will think and assign the problem and your own unhappiness, your own lack of peace, your own lack of self-acceptance to them. So just like it is with Finding You, our 5-day workshop is the fundamental basis of our work. The couples and family builds on that. But the couples and families are more advanced. If you're a novice, start with individual work. And the more convinced you are that somebody in your circle needs therapy, the more quickly I would encourage you to run to therapy yourself and show them how it's done. Take the burden of your own serenity off of their shoulders and place it squarely where it belongs, which is on your shoulders. I hope this is helpful. I like talking about it. I like learning about it as I study and prepare for it. All right. My 2 books, as you know, are on Amazon and Audible, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, The Audacity to Be You. We have an opening that just opened up with our July 23rd. That's a week from today. So there's a spot that just opened up. Somebody had to pull out. August 13th is the last Finding You intensive I will be running in 2025. So if you've been waiting to work with me, that is the last offering this year. For a coach, for a therapist, for inquiries about private intensive, suggestions, feedback, go to our website or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. If you want to attend the 5-day workshop at the beautiful Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, go to eomega.org, click on workshops, and click on the Audacity to Be You. October 12th through 17th, that will be me and my daughter Emma, around $500, which is incredible value. My next broadcast, I haven't decided on the topic. I'm open to suggestions or questions that could lead me to a topic, but it'll be next Tuesday. That's for sure. Next Tuesday, July 22nd at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I look forward to that. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And as always, for on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thank you for doing your work, for owning your own life's responsibility, because that makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.